So welcome back to my channel. So I'm carrying on reviewing Empire of Normality. We haven't got much more to go now, almost at the end. So I got up to last time when I was talking about how Chapman was arguing that the neurodiversity movement holds that society requires diversity, but placing a demand on society to support neurodiversity because of the idea that it takes more than just neurotypical minds for group society to function. He was saying how that was the opposite of what Nazi ideology held, and how Nazis' views saw society as an organism that required uniformity of all its parts. But I was making a point in the previous video that actually I don't really see that much difference between arguing that society needs diversity and arguing that society needs uniformity. They're both an appeal to the collective to justify individual worth, whereas I was saying that a truly socialist, humanitarian perspective would stress the inalienable worth of each individual, and with that comes the inalienable right of every individual to determine their own existence independent of the collective. And I would say that surely democratic socialism should be really enabling every single person in society to be able to flourish for themselves as an autonomous, as an individual who has their own wants, their own desires, their own needs, and it's the job of society not to impose anything on them and say, oh, that person exists because they have to benefit society, because as soon as you start appealing to the collective, you basically introduce the argument that certain groups are a burden, because you're saying that they don't bring anything, they don't offer anything to the group as a whole. It facilitates the argument that certain groups are a burden, whereas if you come at it from the inalienable right of every individual that has worth, that has value, irrespective of any other variable, essentially, that is a truly supportive, I would say, socialist society, where the job of society is to make sure that no one is left behind, that everyone can lead a decent life. Society protects people. Society is a kind of security blanket that in fact protects people so that every single person can live the best life they can for that person. It's like for, to each according to their needs, essentially. It's like enabling every person to reach their full potential. And there shouldn't be any, in my opinion, any appeal to the collective. But the person's value is not justified by any appeal to the collective. That, to me, is a short road to fascism and all types of other oppressive ideologies, Stalinism, fascism, whatever. It basically, as soon as you start arguing along those lines, you're going to introduce some form of oppression along the way. So I actually find that argument quite offensive, the idea that somehow the only reason people should accommodate and support people with neurodisabilities is because they function, because this idea that diversity benefits the group. That is a very dangerous argument. Now, Chapman does argue, he says, that some versions of neurodiversity theory, he said, can be made to cohere with capitalist logics. For example, if capitalists recognise that neurodiversity helps groups function, then they can adopt a liberal perspective that conserves neurodivergent people, whatever. I don't like the word neurodivergent myself, that's just a word he used, okay, so I'm going to use it. That conserves neurodivergent people to the extent they're able to be mined for productivity. So this still develops an in-group. Sorry, it still requires an in-group and an out-group, because by definition it can only apply to some neurodivergent people, i.e. those who have skills that can be mined by capitalism, those that can be exploited because they have something to offer, because they can be productive. It by definition excludes, I guess, people like me who can't work at all, who can't whose nature of their disability literally means they cannot work. So so it's very exclusionary, he says. So obviously capitalism can co-opt the argument that neurodiversity helps groups function. They can co-opt it and make it fit for capitalism, which really actually does just require some uniformity. I mean, they go on about, it takes all different kinds of minds, but really, it doesn't. That's just a platitude, because for the capitalist, it's okay if you have a different mind, so long as it doesn't stray too far away from capitalism, because they need to mine you for profit. So you can't have a mind that's too extremely different. That is not accepted. So there's always a catch here. It's a bit like when people say, like, oh, just be yourself, But then, of course, some types of self are accepted and some types aren't. It's a similar sort of thing. It only goes so far. There's this kind of unwritten, unsaid assumption that diversity is fine so long as it doesn't stray too far. Then it becomes a threat. So really, the capitalist, when capitalism goes on about how great diversity is, it's kind of contains an inherent contradiction, because really capitalism actually wants people to conform. There's a kind of like a narrow kind of a sort of narrow arena, if you like, where people can diverge, but it's really just uniformity, because you have to stay in that middle ground. As long as the diversity is contained within that middle ground, it's fine. But really, that's just different ways of conforming. It's diversity within uniformity. It's kind of like another dynamic, another dialectic within capitalism. Now, Chapman says that he's against the old Cartesian dualism, whether in its original or Satsian form. See my other videos where I talked about how Sats endorsed a version of Cartesian or dualist sort of reasoning around mental health, mental illness. Chapman says that neuro emphasises the embodied nature of mind and cognition as inseparable from the body. This connects mental health politics with the broader politics of disablement, he says. He says that this provides a more unified politics than is possible under the Cartesian approach that seeks to distinguish mental distress from bodily illness. So I agree with him there. I'm against Cartesianism myself. The mind is the brain, and the brain is the mind. Anyway, that's a different topic. So carrying on. But yes, I do agree with him there that it's all embodied. He says neurodiversity theory centres disabled people as primary experts in their own experience, providing a challenge to the authority of psychiatrists, and also he says it challenges the authority of a clinician class. I've noticed that quite a lot of these neurodiversity advocates go on about the clinician class, but I always find it rather ironic, because they themselves occupy a very privileged elitist position in the hallowed halls of universities. I could call them the academic class. Do you know what I mean? There's a certain irony there. It's like one form of privilege is kind of kind of firing darts at another form of privilege. You know what I mean? They seem to be obsessed with this clinician class, like, you know, the oppressor. You know, this whole idea that clinicians are out to get you. You know, I just don't get it, man. If asked me, most clinicians are out to help people. You know, but it's all very easy, isn't it? Just to like create a kind of, you know, a sort of something to fire darts at, as it were. You know, something to a bogey. You know, a bogeyman or something. You know, it's like that. Yeah, I agree with him that, you know, people should always take into account someone's lived experience. I mean, that's just kind of common courtesy, really. But the whole idea that we should sort of like wholesale denounce the so-called clinician class is just very reductive. Okay, so I'm going to move over to the next video now to carry on. We're going through this book, so moving on to the next video now.